Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the fiscal year 2021-22 California State Preschool Program Expansion Funding Request for Applications webinar presented by the California Department of Education, CDE, Early Education Division, EED today, March 17th, 2002, from 3 to 5 p.m. Next slide, please. Good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining us. My name is Jackie Luong. I am an application analyst in the Administrative and Funding Services Office. Our presenters today include myself, Crystal Devlin, Administrator in the Program Quality Implementation PQI Office, Alyssa Rodriguez, and Joey Boyd from the Early Education Nutrition and Fiscal Services Office, EENFS. We also have a great team on the line to respond to questions as they arise. We have from the PQI office consultants Nancy DeArmond, Shelley Wright McCall, Amy Silva, Nadia Kersey, and Kira Lancaster. From the EENFS office, we have Yashima Daniels. We also have Mai Zhang, Staff Services Analyst from the PQI office, who is facilitating the webinar and will posting links in the chat for you. Please note that the chat is not open for participants to post. Please post your questions and comments in the Q&A feature. We will be responding to as many questions as we can. For those that we are unable to get to or may not have the answer to, we will take back and develop FAQs to post on a RFA webpage. Next slide, please. On the agenda today, we have overview of the fiscal year FY 2021 to 22 California State Preschool Program, CSPP, Expansion Funding Request for Applications, RFAs, application requirements, application review process, completing the application, considerations for CSPP as an extended early learning and care option, resources, and questions. Now I'll hand it over to Crystal to provide an overview of the fiscal year 2021 to 22 CSPP expansion funding requests for applications.
Thank you, Jackie. Hi, everyone, and thank you for joining us today. I'm really excited to be here with all of you. My name is Crystal Devlin. I'm an administrator in the Early Education Division Program Quality Implementation Office. We're going to start today by providing you with an overview of the fiscal year 2021-22 CSPP expansion funding RFA. We'll discuss the intent of the CSPP expansion RFA, the available funding, and the funding priorities. Then we're going to provide you the definition of CSPP age eligibility and provide you with the statutory and regulatory background for this request for applications. Next, we'll discuss the requirements for subcontracting your CSPP services with another entity and the requirements for operating the CSPP through a CSPP Family Childcare Home Education Network, also known as a FICHN. We'll also discuss general eligibility for funding and additional eligibility for funding requirements for both current contractors and new LEA applicants who do not currently hold a CSPP contract with the state. Then we're going to provide you with a brief overview of general CSPP contract information, how contract payments are made, and finally, we will talk about requests for service level exemptions or startup requests. Next slide, please. The intent of this request for applications is to expand CSPP services statewide to the greatest extent possible. These funds are intended to increase the availability of CSPP services to eligible children, and CSPP services must be provided based on the needs of the families in the communities in which they'll be served, and also based on the priorities set forth in law. The RFA funding opportunity is available again to local education agencies or LEAs that are current CSPP contractors, or to LEAs that do not currently hold a CSPP contract with the CDE Early Education Division. An LEA is defined as a school district, county office of education, a community college district, or a direct funded charter school. Next slide, please. Okay, so there's $130 million to expand CSPP services statewide, which was appropriated in the 2021-22 Budget Act and as amended by Senate Bill 129. Funding will be allocated by county and within each county by the local planning council or LPC priority area. Funding awards will be based on the LPC priority in the order of the highest passing score first. In the event that a county does not fully utilize its allocation, the funding will be redistributed to other applicants based on the LPC priority, followed by the highest score. Next slide, please. The CSPP funds will be used to provide CSPP services for eligible 3- and 4-year-old children. The CSPP definitions of eligibility based on age are as follows. CSPP eligible 4-year-old children are defined as children who have their 4th birthday on or before December 1 of the fiscal year that they are being served, or a child whose 5th birthday occurs after September 1 of the fiscal year in which they are enrolled in a CSPP and whose parent or guardian has opted to retain or enroll them in a state preschool program. CSPP eligible 3-year-old children are defined as children who have their 3rd birthday on or before December 1 of the fiscal year that they are being served. Children who have their 3rd birthday on or after December 2nd of the fiscal year may be enrolled in a California state preschool program on or after their 3rd birthday. Next slide, please. So looking at some of the statutory and regulatory background, the California Education Code, EC, Section 8205, defines a local education agency as a school district, county office of education, a community college district, or a school district acting on behalf of one or more schools within the school district. Direct funded charter schools will be considered an LEA for the purposes of this request for applications. Contractors under contract with the CDE to administer the CSPP are required to comply with all laws, regulations, rules, policies, and reporting procedures for the state preschool program contracts. Next slide. Continuing with the statutory and regulatory background, CSPP contractors must sign their CSPP contracts attesting that they will comply with the Early Education Act, commencing with Education Code Section 8200, the California Code of Regulations, Title V, known as 5 CCR, commencing with Section 18000, including the CSPP free or reduced price meal eligibility and enrollment implementation guidance, and any successor regulations adopted by the CDE Early Education Division. The California Code of Regulations, Title 22 CCR, Child Care Licensing Regulations as applicable, and the Uniform Administrative Requirements, Cost Principles, and Audit Requirements for Federal Awards, which is in Code of Federal Regulations, Title II, or 2 CFR Part 200. Contractors are also required to follow all requirements in the Federal School Accounting Manual, as well as the CDE Audit Guide, both of which are available on the CDE website. Next slide, please. LEA applicants that are awarded a CSPP contract will be required to adhere to all applicable laws and regulations associated with the contract, as well as the terms and conditions set forth in the contract terms and conditions, also known as the CT&Cs, and the program requirements applicable to the fiscal year in which the services are provided under the CSPP contract. The current CT&Cs and the CSPP program requirements for fiscal year 2021-22 are available on the CDE Early Education webpage at https://www.cd.ca.gov/FG//AC/FG/AC2021.ASP. And Mai will put the link to the CT&Cs in the chat for you now. LEA applicants that are awarded a CSPP contract must also adhere to the standards and procedures for audits of California K-12 local education agencies issued by the Education Audit Appeals Panel, the EAAP, as regulations. These regulations are available on the EAAP Audit Guide webpage at https://eaap.ca.gov/audit-guide/. And again, Mai will also put the link to the EAAP Audit Guide in the chat for you now. Okay, next slide. LEA applicants that are awarded a CSPP contract are permitted to subcontract in accordance with the Education Code 5 CCR, also known as Title V, and the CT&Cs set forth in the CSPP contract. As set forth in 5 CCR, Chapter 19, Section 2, Article 2, or any successor regulations, all subcontracts not otherwise exempt must be approved by the CDE in accordance with the regulations. If approved, the applicant contractor remains responsible for ensuring that the subcontractor complies with all administrative, programmatic, and fiscal requirements of the CSPP contract. Note that reimbursement of administrative costs shall not exceed a total of 15% of the net reimbursable program costs or actual administrative costs for all contractors and subcontractors in accordance with Education Code Section 8258. Next slide. Okay, so CSPP Family Child Care Home Education Networks. Applicants may also apply for CSPP funding to operate the CSPP via a Family Child Care Home Education Network, again, a FITCHN, and the applicant contractor is responsible for administrative, programmatic, and fiscal compliance with the CSPP, including the CT&Cs and the program requirements, as well as compliance with the laws and regulations pertaining to FITCHNs. A CSPP contractor operating via FITCHN must adhere to the requirements set forth in Education Code Section 8223, which requires FITCHNs to recruit, enroll, and certify eligible families, recruit, train, support, and reimburse licensed family child care home providers, collect family fees in accordance with contract requirements, assess, according to the standards set by the Department of Education, the educational quality of the program offered in each family child care home that is in the network, ensure that the developmental profile, or the DRDP, is completed for each child based on observations of network staff in consultation with the family child care home provider. The contractor must also monitor requirements, including the quality standards, and conduct periodic assessments of program quality in each family child care home affiliated with the network. You must also ensure that basic health and nutrition requirements are met and provide data and reporting in accordance with the contract requirements. Next slide, please. Okay, so now we're going to talk a little bit about eligibility for funding. To apply for CSPP funding pursuant to this RFA, All agencies must be, again, a local education agency and be licensed in accordance with the 22 CCR Child Care Licensing Division regulations, or be eligible for licensing in accordance with 22 CCR, I'm so sorry about that, Child Care Licensing Division, or otherwise be exempt from 22 CCR Child Care Licensing Division requirements pursuant to Health and Safety Code Section 1596.792 and small o, and in accordance with 5 CCR Section 18140, when the LEA requests a license exemption and is issued a certificate of classroom exemption from child care licensing regulations by the Department of Education. Next slide, please. LEAs that are current CSPP contractors are eligible to apply for new or additional CSPP funds, except when one or more of the following conditions apply during the request for application cycle. The California State Preschool Program contractor is on conditional contract status because of fiscal or programmatic noncompliance as described in 5 CCR sections 18303 or 18304. Or the CDE EED has conducted a compliance review pursuant to 5 CCR section 18023, and the contractor has failed to clear items of fiscal and or programmatic noncompliance identified during the review within 12 months of the issuance of the compliance review report. Next slide, please. Continuing with eligibility for funding for our current CSPP contractors, and when they would not be eligible to apply. If the CSPP contractor has in place or places a person in a position of fiscal responsibility or control who has been convicted of a crime involving misuse or misappropriation of state or federal funds, or a state or federal crime involving moral turpitude. Ed Code section 8316, or the CDE reduced the CSPP contractor's current year contract maximum reimbursement amount, the MRA, due to the contractor's inability to utilize its full contract amount, whether through low enrollment or low expenditures for the CSPP contracts. And this can be found in 5 CCR section 18001. Next slide. Additionally, current contracting LEAs may be determined on a case-by-case basis to be ineligible to receive CSPP expansion funding if the LEA was previously awarded CSPP expansion funding and has not yet begun to provide services with that funding, or the CDE has evidence that the LEA has not been able to successfully fulfill the current contract requirements by serving children in a quality program and in a fiscally responsible manner. If the LEA is determined to be ineligible for expansion funding based on either of these grounds, the LEA will be apprised of the specific facts supporting the ineligibility. Next slide. So, eligibility for funding for new LEA applicants. An LEA applicant who is not a current CDE contractor is eligible to apply for CSPP funding, except when one or more of the following conditions apply. The LEA applicant had a previous contract with the CDE that was terminated or not continued by the CDE due to fiscal and or programmatic noncompliance, as described in 5 CCR sections 18303 or 18304 within the 3 years immediately preceding the date that this RFA was posted. The LEA applicant had a previous contract with the CDE and has an outstanding accounts receivable balance with the CDE. And you can find definitions for these things in 5 CCR section 18001. Okay, next slide. Continuing with the eligibility for funding for new LEA applicants, when they would not be eligible to apply, would be an LEA applicant that had a previous contract with the CDE and has a delinquent audit with the CDE pursuant to 5 CCR section 18073, or the LEA applicant or potential subcontractor has in place or places a person in a position of fiscal responsibility or control who has been convicted of a crime involving misuse or misappropriation of state or federal funds, or a state or federal crime involving moral turpitude. Education Code Section 8316. Okay, now we're going to turn it over to our Early Education and Nutrition Fiscal Services Unit to discuss information regarding contracts and payments to contractors.
Thank you, Crystal. So let's go over general CSPP contract information. So a CSPP contract issued by the CDE is a legally binding agreement between the CDE and a contractor. The contractor agrees to provide CSPP services according to defined fiscal and programmatic requirements, and the CDE agrees to reimburse the contractor for those services according to the defined limits. The contractor's minimum reimbursement amount, or MRA, will be negotiated based on the proposed award amount. Annual CSPP contracts are effective for one state fiscal year, so from July 1st through June 30th, unless otherwise stated in the contract. A successful applicant will have 3 full fiscal years from the date of the proposed award letter to open sites and classrooms and begin providing CSPP services. If the proposed sites and classrooms are not opened within 3 years from the date of the proposed award letter, the applicant will receive formal notice from the EED that the proposed award is rescinded. After the initial CSPP contract period, the contractor's eligibility for continued funding each subsequent year is contingent upon compliance with all of the following: the contract terms and conditions and program requirements, evidence of satisfactory contract performance, all relevant state and applicable federal reporting requirements, approval by the CDE, and pursuant to 5 CCR, contractors have no vested right in a subsequent contract. Next, we will move on to how contract payments will be made. Funds cannot be dispersed until a formal contract between CDE and the contractor has been fully executed. Contingent upon the availability of funds, no award of money is final until a contract has been fully executed, which occurs when both parties have signed the contract. The CDE has the right to conduct additional due diligence to ensure that the awarded agency can fulfill the fiscal and programmatic requirements of the contract. Once the contract is executed, the contractor will receive a copy of the contract. CSPP contract payments will be made by the CDE according to the contract terms and state and federal laws. Payments will only be made for reimbursable costs incurred during the contract period, subject to the terms and conditions set forth in the contract signed by an authorized representative of both the CDE and the contractor, Costs incurred before the period of performance in a fully executed contract are not reimbursable expenditures. CSPP contract funds must be spent on reimbursable startup costs and/or reimbursable costs for eligible children served during the contract period. The CDE, Early Education Nutrition and Fiscal Services, or EENFS, unit is responsible for generating contract payments. These payments are adjusted to correspond to the projected amount earned or expended by a contractor through the end of the contract period. The first payment of funds should not be expected for at least 6 to 8 weeks after the contract is signed, returned, and approved by the CDE's Contracts Office. Payment on or after July 1st of any fiscal year can be made only when the California state budget has been approved by the legislature and approved by the governor. At the time of the application, the CDE recommends contractors have 3 months of operating capital available to administer the CSPP prior to receiving state contract payments from the EENFS. Examples of acceptable operating capital would include, but are not limited to, cash or a line of credit. 3 months of operating capital is approximately 1/4 of the CSPP contract's total annual MRA. The CDE may recoup any payments made for costs that are not reasonable and necessary, and is entitled to recover any costs of the recoupment. Claims for reimbursement shall not be made unless there are adequate documents to support the claims. The contractor has the burden of supporting claims for reimbursement. Next, we will go over request for service level exemption, or startup allowance. In accordance with EC Section 8255 and 5 CCR Section 18034, a new or expanding CSPP may not have sufficient enrollment during the first contract period while the program is starting up, but may have reimbursable expenses. The statute allows the CDE to approve and reimburse startup costs in an amount not to exceed 15% of the total award amount without the contractor providing services, and allows applicants to submit a request for service level exemption, also known as a startup allowance. The startup allowance is not additional funding, but is part of the total contract MRA. Applicants may request a startup allowance that may be used for all of the following: the employment and orientation of new staff, the setting up of or the program and facility, the finalization of rental agreements and the making of necessary deposits, the purchase of a reasonable inventory of materials and supplies, the purchase of an additional premium for insurance. Contracted agencies will only be reimbursed for approved reimbursable startup expenses incurred during the contract period. Unexpended funds cannot be transferred to a subsequent fiscal year. Startup costs for this RFA may be available during fiscal year 21-22 and/or 22-23. Applicants requesting startup costs may submit the request for service level exemption to their EENFS analyst once an award letter has been received. All items listed in the startup allowance request may be approved by the EENFS and the EED, if applicable. The EED will approve the high-value equipment and renovation and repairs costs. The EENFS will approve the remaining requested items in the startup request. Do not make purchases for startup items prior to receiving approval from the EENFS and/or the EED as applicable. Now back to Crystal to talk about the application requirements.
Thank you, Alyssa. All right, now we're going to go over the application requirements, including application package preparations, the format of the application, the presentation of the application, and the submission requirements. The CDE requires that all applications for CSPP funding be completed in accordance with the instructions set forth in the RFA. Applications must be received by the due date, include all required signatures, and be eligible for funding in accordance with the Title V requirements. The application must demonstrate the applicant's working knowledge of state and federal requirements for child care and development programs. And applicants must submit all required information and forms requested in the RFA. Applications that are incomplete or not in compliance with the application instructions may be rejected. Applicants must include all required signatures. Hard copies that are delivered in person or by mail must be signed in blue ink. Written notification will be provided to all applicants whose applications do not meet the submission requirements. It is the applicant's sole responsibility to carefully review the RFA information and requirements before applying for CSPP expansion funding. Applications must also conform to the format requirements cited in Section X, written program narrative of the RFA regarding paper size, margins, fonts, and page restrictions for responses. Applicants must use 8.5 by 11-inch paper, single-sided only. All margins must be a minimum of 1/2 inch from the edge of the paper. Only standard 12-point font, e.g. Arial or Times New Roman, that does not exceed 6 lines per inch must be used. Do not use compressed, narrow, or script font. Responses to the written program narrative questions are limited to the space provided. Do not attach additional sheets. Each applicant must complete and include Section 1, applicant information, as the first page of the entire application. And we will be moving to our webpage in a little bit to look at these documents. When mailing or hand delivering a hard copy of the application to the CDE, do not attach additional covers or place applications in binders. Additionally, each application must be adequately stapled in the upper left-hand corner. When considering the cost of preparing the application, note that the applicant accepts the sole responsibility for all costs incurred in the development of its application. These costs are not reimbursable, even if the applicant is awarded funds through this RFA. Okay, so applicants may submit the RFA electronically by email or physically by mail or in person. Sorry about that. Electronic submissions are strongly encouraged. We are strongly encouraging folks to submit their applications to us via email. And we'll provide the email address here shortly. So you see here on this slide that it says now that the due date is April 21, 2022 by 5:00 p.m. It was previously April 7th. However, we have extended the due date to give folks additional time. And there was an erratum issued, and the date should be updated on March 16th to extend this due date again from April 7th, 2022. This information, along with other changes to the RFA timeline, are available on the RFA webpage. Okay, now for an electronic RFA with a digital signature, which is option 1, the RFA must be digitally signed by the excuse me, by the applicant's authorized representative if submitting it electronically. Option 2 for an electronic submission is a scanned RFA. So you may choose to print the RFA, physically sign each of the required forms, and scan and email the RFA to the RFA email inbox. Please note that the size of the scanned attachment must not exceed 25 megabytes. Important, if you are submitting electronically, email the completed and signed RFA and all required attachments to csppr@cde.ca.gov. And I will drop that email address in the chat for you now. Okay, so for a physical RFA by mail or in person, also a hard copy, these may be mailed or hand delivered to the CDE EED. The original copy requires an original signature of the applicant's authorized representative, and all original signatures in the RFA must be in blue ink. If you're submitting your hard copies by mail, the completed and signed RFA and all required attachments must be date stamped no later than 5 p.m. on April 21, 2022. If you're submitting hard copies in person, the completed and signed RFA and all required attachments must be delivered to the CDE no later than 5 p.m. on April 21, 2022. All hard copies must be delivered to the following address: California Department of Education, Early Education Division, Attention Administration and Fiscal Services, 1430 N Street, Suite 3410, Sacramento, California, 95814-5901. And I will drop the address in the chat for you. Excuse me. I'm gonna get a drink of water here real quick. So a reminder, when you're mailing or hand delivering a hard copy of the application to the CDE, do not attach additional covers or place applications in binders. Additionally, again, each application must be adequately stapled in the upper left-hand corner. No changes, modifications, corrections, or additions may be made to the applications once it is received by the CDE. All applicants agree that by submitting the application that they authorize the CDE to verify any and all claimed information, including any referenced names in the application. All submitted applications remain the property of the CDE and may be subject to disclosure in the event of a Public Records Act request. Okay, now I'm going to hand it back over to Jackie to talk about the application review process that is conducted by the Department of Education Early Education Division.
Thank you, Crystal. Now let's talk about the application review process, which includes all of the following: preliminary screening process, evaluation and scoring, application results notification, appeals, and notification of awards. Next slide, please. Preliminary screening. Applications will be preliminary screened to determine whether the applicant and listed subcontractors, if applicable, are eligible for funding, as described in the program funding section of the RFA overview and instructions. The EED may request additional documentation to determine the structure of the applicant or subcontract. Applications will be screened to determine if the application has been completed in accordance with the instructions and submitted by the due date. Incomplete applications and/or applications not completed in accordance with the instructions and timelines may be disqualified. It is the sole responsibility of the applicant to carefully review the RFA information and requirements before submitting an application for funding. Although the CDE has the right to exercise reasonable discretion and waive minor discrepancies in application and submission requirements that do not impact the integrity of the submission, it is not required to do so. Disqualified applicants will be informed in writing of the reasons for the disqualification and may appeal the decision within 10 days of receipt of the notification of disqualification. The EED will evaluate and score each application that has successfully passed the preliminary screening process. Next slide, please. Evaluation and scoring criteria. Applications will be scored in accordance with the scoring criteria set forth in the written program narrative section of the RFA, which aligns with the scoring rubric. The applicant's score is based solely on the assessment of the written program narrative. The applicant must obtain a minimum score of 79.8, which is 70% of the 114 total points possible to be eligible for funding. Next slide, please. The CDE will begin notifying all eligible applicants of their score via email beginning May 12, 2022. Next slide, please. Appeals. After receiving written notification of their score, applicants may review their application, the criteria used to score the application, and any reader comments on the scoring rubric for the application. If an applicant wishes to appeal their score, they must send a written notice of appeal to the CDE, which must be received by the CDE within 10 business days of receipt of their score notification. Appeals are due to the CDE on May 26, 2022 by 5 p.m. The notice of appeal must include the following information: the appellant's name, mailing address, and telephone number, the names of the persons who will present the appeal at the appeal hearing, whether the representatives will attend the appeal hearing in person or will communicate through telephone, conference call, or virtual meeting, written materials that explain why the specific written program narrative components should have received a higher score. Appellants must submit the notice of appeal to the CDE electronically via email or hard copy via mail. The CDE strongly encourages appellants to submit their appeals electronically to ensure timely receipt. Send the notice of appeal to California Department of Education, Early Education Division, attention, Appeals Coordinator, 1430 N Street, Suite 3410, Sacramento, California, 95814. Phone 916-322-1273. Fax 916-323-6853. You can also email us at eedappeals@cde.ca.gov. The CDE shall notify the appellants in writing of the results of the appeal within 10 business days of the appeal hearing. The appeal will be limited to the application submitted in response to the RFA. The CDE's decision is the final administrative action afforded the appeal. Next slide, please. The CDE will email proposed funding awards to successful applicants beginning on June 15, 2022. If necessary, the EENFS unit will contact successful applicants to ask clarifying questions regarding the fiscal information submitted with the application. The CDE reserves the right to ask follow-up questions or request additional documentation of successful applicants through email, telephone, or on-site visits that the applicant meets all eligibility and legal requirements and is capable of fulfilling all contract requirements prior to awarding a final CSPP contract. Proposed awards may be revoked at any time at the discretion of the CDE. No award is final until the CDE receives a completed and signed contract package from the applicant and the contract is executed by the CDE. Applicants should not incur any costs or expenses in reliance upon a proposed award. At the time of contracting, all contractors may be expected to sign additional compliance certifications. For example, air or water pollution violations, recycled paper certifications, or child care support compliance. And back to Crystal to discuss how to complete the CSPP expansion funding application.
Thank you, Jackie. Okay, so in a moment, we're going to navigate over to the fiscal year 2021-22 CSPP expansion funding RFA webpage to walk you through the application and some of the other documents. When we navigate over, we will first look at the main page, and we will be sharing our screen as we look at the main page, and also as we walk through the application, the fiscal forms, the written program narrative with the scoring criteria, and the program narrative forms. However, Maya is going to go ahead and put the link to the main page in the chat for you now. And as we navigate to the application and the various forms while we are on the website, Maya will also add those links in the chat for you. Thank you, Maya. After we review the main page for the RFA, we will move to the application page, which will be the first page you include when submitting your application package. The application page includes Section 1, applicant information, Section 2, legal status of the applicant, Section 3, the county or counties of where you intend to provide service, Section 4, the slots requested, Section 5, intent to subcontract services if applicable, Section 6, intent to operate a CSPP via Family Child Care Home Education Network, again, a FICHN, Section 7, fiscal worksheets, Section 8, fiscal attachments, Section 9, the program attachments, and Section 10, the program narrative. Once we finish reviewing the application, our ENFS team will provide a walkthrough of the fiscal forms, including the full day, full year fiscal forms and the part day, part year fiscal forms. I might take that back. I might not be looking at the part day, part year fiscal forms. So then next slide. Finally, on the webpage, we will take a look at the written program narrative, which is the sole section of the RFA that is scored. And we will also look at the scoring criteria. After we look at the written program narrative, we're going to look at Form A, the program narrative acknowledgement for monitoring, Form B, the program narrative acknowledgement for program quality, and Form C, the program narrative acknowledgement for statutes and regulations. Once we have finished reviewing the CSPP expansion RFA webpage and documents, we will return to this portion of the presentation to provide you with resources for completing the written program narrative and to talk about considerations for CSPP as extended learning opportunities for transitional kindergarten or TK and kindergarten, and provide you with additional resources, including those for facilities development and contact information for staff in the CDE Early Education Division offices. Okay, let's go over to the RFA webpage. Okay, so this is our main RFA webpage, and please note here at the very top, it does say that the application is now due on Thursday, April 21st, 2022. We provide you the information here at the top that is included in the overview and instructions. And then we have here for you where to send your program questions and any questions related to downloading any of the forms, etc., which is the CSPP RFA at cde.ca.gov. Available on this webpage are various documents, including Management Bulletin 2202, which provides additional information for contractors and potential applicants. There's the request for applications overview and instructions. This tells you pretty much everything we're presenting to you here today and provides you step-by-step instructions for completing the application. There's a link here to our CSPP expansion RFA frequently asked questions, and ERATM 1 is what was issued yesterday related to the new due date and revised timeline for the RFA, including your appeal process, score notifications, award notifications, etc. And can you scroll, please, Mai? Thank you. Okay, other documents include the application, which Jackie will share it with you here shortly. The program narrative, again, this is the only section of the RFA that is scored. The full day, full year fiscal forms, the part day, part year fiscal forms, the fiscal year 22-23 program calendar, the justification for operating days, the program staffing plan, and Form A, program narrative acknowledgement for monitoring, Form B, program narrative acknowledgement for program quality, Form C, program narrative acknowledgement for statutes and regulations, and then Form EED 3704B, which is related to subcontractor information if you're going to propose to subcontract your CSPP services. Is there any more there that we need to see, Mai?
That's all of them.
Okay, all right. Now we're going to turn it over to Jackie. Maya is going to pull the application up for us, and Jackie will walk through that with you all.
Sorry about that. I'm having difficulties. Give me one moment. Okay, so this is our RFA application, and if you scroll down, this is where the very first page here, this is where you want to input your contractor's name, and then the headquarter county, and then of course if you don't have a vendor number, you don't need to put anything on there. That will be given to you later on. And then you want to make sure to include the director's name, any of other prior affiliations, director's phone number, fax, email, and then your program's director's name as well. And then your agency's legal business address as well. And when you're filling out the legal name of applicant, it will auto-populate for the rest of the page. Second page here, it's continuation of the first page of section 1. You want to make sure to include who is completing the application. So the name and title of the person completing the application, and also the telephone number and the email address. In section 2, you want to include the applicant's legal status, so either your school district, county office of education, community college, or a directed funding charter school. On the right-hand side, you'll see the county school district code. You want to make sure to input that as well. And also under that, you want to input your current CSP, if you are a current CSPP contractor. Going down to section 3, you want to ensure to put the county or counties of what you're serving. And section 4 here, you want to input the number of children your agency is currently serving for either a full day, full year CSPP or part day, part year. Going down to section 5 is the intent to subcontract services. Now, if you're not going to subcontract, you can go ahead and just skip this section. If you are subcontracting, you want to check that box right there. And then going down to section 6, if you intend to operate a CSPP for FC Chen, then you want to make sure to check that box and also fill out the information below. But if you're not operating an FC Chen, you may skip this section. And going down to section 7, these are the fiscal worksheets that I believe Joey or Alyssa may elaborate on this later on. But this is where you'll be able to click on the link and get those forms. They are in Excel spreadsheet format. And going down to section 8, these are the fiscal attachments as well. All applicants must complete and submit the program staffing plan. It can be accessed through that link, clicking on that link, or also in our RFA webpage. And then section 9 is our program calendar attachments. We have the program calendar, which is linked on the first box, and the second link of the justification for operating days. They could be accessed here in the RFA webpage, and also, or in this RFA documentation, or also in the RFA webpage. And going down to section 10 is the program narrative. We have the written program narrative, which can be accessed here and or the RFA webpage. All contractors need to complete the program narrative. If you can go to the program narrative page to show them how it looks like, it will be in landscape format. That's the program calendar. This will be the program narrative acknowledgement, Form A. This is the program narrative acknowledgement, Form B, for program quality. This is Form C for the program narrative acknowledgement for statutes and regulations. And this is the program narrative. So as we scroll down, it's going to be a 44-page. As Crystal mentioned before, you do want to enter your responses in that box. I can go back to the RFA application, please. Thank you. So as Mai showed you earlier, there was the program narrative, which was the 44-page one. And following that is the program narrative acknowledgement monitoring, which is the Form A, the program narrative acknowledgement quality, which is Form B, and also the program narrative acknowledgement statutes and regulations, Form C. So as we scroll down to section 11, which is the applicant certification, contractors need to read the following: that you have read the full contents of this application, and to the best of your knowledge, the information that you input in this application is true and correct. Please scroll down. And just ensure that you sign this part right here. Go ahead and scroll into the next page, please. Okay. In section 12 is the requirement checklist. Make sure that you read the whole criteria through. There's the applicant initials and the EED use only. Don't touch the EED use only. That will be for us. Make sure to initial the applicant initials for all these following below. And then section 13 is the application checklist. Again, the due date for the RFA is on Thursday, April 21st, 2022. You can submit it electronically at csppRFA@cde.ca.gov. And just make sure to check mark all the boxes that you're submitting, just to ensure that you have all the documentation submitted in correctly and timely. And it will go down to the next page. And that's all of the checklist items. And now if it's okay for E and FS to go through the fiscal form, that would be great. Thank you.
Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. So let's look at an example of the fiscal form that has been filled out for CSPP. Remember, this is only an example, and you will complete your forms with information appropriate for your agency. Also, we will only be reviewing the CSPP full day, full year forms today. But if you are applying for CSPP part day, part year, you will need to submit the part day, part year forms. Site-specific information has 4 parts that can be found on worksheets A1 through A4. You will need to complete all 4 worksheets for each full day, full year site. Similarly, you will need to complete all 4 parts for part day, part year worksheets for each site you are applying. Be sure to create a copy and fill out all 4 parts of the worksheets for each site for which you are applying funding. The instructions for creating a copy of the tab are on the top of the forms in worksheets A1 through A4. So let's start with worksheet A1. First, applicants will select the service county in which the services will be provided. It's important that agencies select the correct county because county specific rates and adjustment factors to determine funding is dependent on the service county selected. After applicants select the service county, you will enter basic site information, including the site name, site address, number of classrooms, license number, license type, and license capacity. In this example for worksheet A1, we're looking at Oz Childcare, site information for Magnolia Center in Los Angeles County. Okay, let's move on to worksheet A2, which shows a summary of the rate and adjustment factors. As mentioned in worksheet A1, the information used in worksheet A2 is dependent on the contractor choosing the service county for the site. Once the applicant selects the service county in worksheet A1, this information will auto-populate in worksheet A2. Applicants do not have to fill any fields out in worksheet A2. It's just a reference of the county rates and adjustment factors. Okay, for worksheet A3, you will enter the number of certified children you plan to serve per day under the appropriate time-based or special criteria. This example is showing the 3 and 4-year-old categories, which is the time-based section for CSPP. On this page, you will enter the number of children you plan to serve per day under the appropriate time-based or special criteria. Once the data is entered, the Excel worksheet will multiply the number of children by the adjustment factor. This will calculate the adjusted child days of enrollment and auto-populate this data on the right. So for this example, it's saying that Magnolia Center will have 24 children under the 3 and 4-year-old full-time category, which results in 24 total adjusted child days of enrollment per day. 10 children under the 1/2 time category, which results in 6.334 total adjusted child days of enrollment. Below these categories is the special criteria sections, which include exceptional needs, limited and non-English proficient, CPS or at risk or abuse or neglect, and severely disabled. At the bottom of this page, the Excel worksheet will also calculate the auto-populate the total certified children you plan to serve for this site, as well as the total adjusted child days of enrollment per day. In this example, the total adjusted child days of enrollment is 30.3340. Okay, so moving on to worksheet A4. This section of the application will calculate how much funding you are requesting for a specific site based on the enrollment data you have entered in the previous sections. In worksheet A4, the only data that you will need to enter is the total days of operation, which should correspond to your full year calendar that you submit with this RFA. Here's an example of worksheet A4 for the CSPP RFA that we've completed. So once you have entered the days of operation in section 3 at the bottom of this page, the remaining cells within this page will calculate and auto-populate. Total adjusted child days of enrollment is going to pull the information that was calculated in worksheet A3, which in our example was 30.3340. In our example for total days of operation from the program calendar, we entered 248. When total adjusted child days of enrollment is multiplied by days of operation, the result is the total annual adjusted child days of enrollment that equals 7,522.8320. This figure is going to get multiplied by the daily rate of 62.66 to arrive at the total requested amount for this specific site of 471,403. Okay, the next form we're going to look at is worksheet A5. This is the full day, full year total adjusted non-certified days of enrollment information for all sites. You will only need one copy of worksheet A5 for all sites. This section is for all non-certified children who will be served in the same classroom at the same time as the certified children. Just to clarify, certified children are those paid for with CSPP funds. Non-certified children are paid for with another funding source, such as parent fees. The funds you are requesting are for certified children, but we will review the data for non-certified children you plan to serve as it's going to affect the calculation. We will show you how that works once we get to the budget pages later on. Here's an example of a portion of worksheet A5 for this specific RFA. As we just mentioned, data on this form is a summary of all non-certified children. This data will also be populating on the budget pages. Okay, the next forms I will go over is worksheet A6. This is the full day, full year site summary information page. You should complete a single copy of worksheet A6 to cover all proposed sites from this application. Worksheet A6 will summarize the information for all of the sites you are proposing to serve with this RFA. You will complete this summary by entering the requested data in the first 3 columns. This specific information will be found on worksheets A1, A3, and A4 from each of the requested sites that you have completed. So here we have an example of worksheet A6 for this specific RFA. So as I mentioned, this is the summary page. You will need to enter your site-specific data for each of the proposed sites. Whether you have 1 site or 10, they must all be listed here. This is important because information from this worksheet will get auto-populated to the budget pages later on. So for our example, we just have the 1 site listed, the Magnolia Center. We have also listed the total children per day that we plan to serve, which is 34. And also listed is the total funds requested per site, which for this 1 site is 471,403. Once you have completed the entries for all sites, the rest of the form will calculate and auto-populate the total funds requested for you. Verify that the total funds requested per site matches the site-specific total from each worksheet from A4. One important note I just want to remind everyone of is you absolutely need to make sure that you put the correct proposed days of operation on worksheets A4. If not entered correctly, the funding amount will not calculate properly. Okay, so before we get into the budget pages, starting with A7, I'm going to go over some more definitions for you needed to fill out these budget pages, starting with expenses. Child development expenditures are reported in accordance with the California School Accounting Manual, which classifies expenditures according to the types of items purchased or services obtained. Expenditures are categorized into the following object codes: 1,000 for certificated salaries, 2,000 for classified salaries, 3,000 for employee benefits, 4,000 for books and supplies, 5,000 for services and other operating expenses, 6,400 for new equipment, and 6,500 for equipment replacement. Looking at that a little closer, the following expenses are listed in the order they appear on the budget form. First, certificated salaries are category 1,000 and are salaries paid to employees with a child development permit, teaching credential, or other appropriate certificate. Classified salaries, category 2,000, are all other salaries for non-certificated staff. Examples are as follows. Category 2,100 are salaries paid to instructional aides who are required to perform any portion of their duty under the supervision of a classroom teacher or that of a special education resource specialist teacher, and that's per Ed Code section 41011. Category 2,200 are salaries paid to instructional media and library, student support, transportation, food services, and maintenance and operations functions. Category 2,300 are salaries paid to supervisory personnel who are business managers, controllers, directors, chief accountants, accounting supervisors, purchasing agents, site administrators, superintendents, and assistant superintendents. Category 2,400 are salaries paid to clerks, assistants, accountants, bookkeepers, programmers, and computer tech support, machine and computer operators, and other similar positions. Next, we have employee benefits in category 3,000, which is the employer's contribution to retirement plans and health and welfare benefits. Books and supplies are category 4,000, which includes expenditures for books and supplies, including costs of sale, use of tax, freight, and handling charges. The cost of food for meals and snacks would also be considered a supply. Service and other operating expenses is category 5,000. On the budget form, this will be a total of lines 5A through 5F, and they are itemized as the following. 5A is expenditures for rentals and leases. 5B is service contracts, including janitorial, consultant, auditor, maintenance contracts. 5C is nutrition expenses related to meals, snacks served for children in the program. An example would be a service agreement with a vendor that you have to provide meals. 5D, 5E, and 5F have to do with travel, insurance, utility, legal, or any other operating expenditures. Next, we have new equipment is category 6,400. This is expenditures for movable personal property, including equipment such as vehicles, machinery, computer systems, and playground equipment. Equipment replacement is category 6,500. And this expenditure for equipment replaced is on a piece by piece basis. These expenditures must be identified for purposes of the calculation of the current expenses of education, and that's written in the Ed Code section 41372. Next, we have depreciation or use allowance. This is taxes, insurance, and maintenance, which may be claimed as a part of actual and allowable cost for buildings or building improvements related to the child development program and equipment necessary for the operation of the program. Also, indirect cost can be charged for an item that would normally fall under categories 1,000 through 5,000, but is not listed in these line items because it cannot be separately identified. Indirect costs may not exceed 10% of the total of categories 1,000 through 5,000, and the LEA shall use the CDE approved rate if it's less than 10%. And last expense we have is admin costs. These are costs incurred for admin activities where neither the family nor the child directly benefits from the activity. This includes any indirect cost and is limited to 15% of the total contract amount. Okay, let's talk about revenue overview for a second, specifically restricted income. Revenue received to support the child development program can come from multiple sources. Revenue is categorized as either restricted or unrestricted income, depending on the source and how it was expended. All income from both certified and non-certified children must be reported. Restricted income is income that may only be expended for specific limited purposes. So an example of child is child nutrition programs, which is revenue received from CDE's Nutrition Service Division for the Child and Adult Care Food Program, National School Lunch Program, School Breakfast Program. Restricted income could also be family fees for certified children or interest earned on CSPP apportionments. Unrestricted income is income that the donor has not restricted for use for certified children, or income the donor has restricted for purposes that are not reimbursable to the contract, including income for services to children not subsidized by the contract. This could be parent fees for non-certified children, donations, grants, or fundraising. Other income is funds needed to run the program in addition to the amount requested. And it may be a combination of both restricted and unrestricted income. Revenue sources for other income include general funds, donations, grants, fundraising, and parents for non-certified children. Okay, so now that we covered some definitions for these budget pages, I'm going to go over an example of how an agency might fill these out. Much of the budget pages are going to auto-populate from the previous worksheets that we discussed earlier. So worksheets A7 through A10 is the budget section and is found on the 4 separate tabs for this RFA. Worksheets A7 is your proposed budget plan, and this is where you will enter your anticipated reimbursable expenses. This section will calculate the budget total to be used in subsequent budget sections. So let's look at the example of worksheet A7 that's on the screen. There are multiple lines of information to complete on this form, but here's an example. So we are showing just a portion of this form. I just want to reiterate that these aren't actual figures from an agency. This is just for demonstration purposes. So starting with line 1, we have certificated salaries. We have 300,000. For classified salaries, we have 200,000. For employee benefits, we have 5,000. Then we jump down on the sheet and we see indirect costs of 6,000. We also have a line for other, and in our example, we're using 15,000. The budget total for this, for all reimbursable expenses, is 526,000. And then we have total admin cost of 10,000. Now let's move on to worksheet A8. Okay, worksheet A8 is the calculation to determine the proration of the budget for certified enrollment. Most of the data in this section will auto-populate from the previous entered fields in this application. So in this example shown here, you can see that total annual adjusted certified days of enrollment is 7,522.8320. Next is the total adjusted non-certified child days of enrollment of 2. Next is the proposed days of operation of 248. The next 2 fields calculate the total annual adjusted non-certified days of enrollment and total enrollment. The next field is the nutrition costs paid for by a federal or state nutrition program. This is the only field that an applicant would need to fill out on this page. This would be any funds from the Child and Adult Care Food Program, School Lunch Program. Those are just 2 examples. In our example, nutrition revenue equals 10,000. Next, we have the budget subtotal of 516,000. And lastly, we have the certified budget portion of 484,083. An important note to remember, this example is serving both certified and non-certified children. This worksheet will multiply your budget subtotal by the percent of certified enrollment and identify the portion of your budget that is purely for certified children. Okay, moving on to worksheet A9. We will determine the total funds needed for this RFA. So this tab will determine if there is other income needed for the program to operate outside of the child development funds that are being applied for in this RFA. There's actually no data entry required on this page. However, if the calculation indicates a positive value under other income needed, the agency should complete worksheet A10 shown on the next slide, and we'll go there in a second. Here's what our example for worksheet A9 looks like. So in our example, we have total funding requested of $471,403. So if approved, this agency would be awarded this amount for this RFA. Our budget example we just looked at says the certified budget portion from worksheet A8 is $484,083. And the next line is the requested contract maximum reimbursement amount, which is going to take the lesser of those two top values, which we see as $471,403. Next, we have the budget total from worksheet A8 of $484,083. However, since your budget says you will need that $484,083, you must have additional funding sources to make up that difference. So in this example, the other income needed is $12,680, which leads us to our last fiscal form. Okay, worksheet A10 is for the other income needed. This section is where you will detail any outside or other income sources in addition to the requested state funds that are required for you to meet the proposed budget expenses. So here's an example of a worksheet A10. So you will enter the data in the information complete column. In our example, we have parent fees for non-certified children for $12,000. And for donations and grants, we have $25,000. That gets us to a grand total of $37,000, which is more than enough to make up the difference from the previous tab. So just a couple reminders. For applicants applying for part day, part year RFA, please use worksheets B1 through B10. The worksheet, the part day, part year fiscal form should be filled out in the same manner as the full day, full year forms we just covered. The only differences in the part year, part day forms is that the minimum days of operation will need to be 75 to 180 days, and the part day adjustment factors are still county specific and is used to convert the contracted full day rate to the part day rate. If your agency has any questions regarding the fiscal forms, you can send an email to the contact email that will be provided at the end of this webinar. That's it for the fiscal forms. I'll now hand it back to the early education division.
All right, thank you so much, Joey. That was a great review of the form. And so now we're going to take a look on the webpage at the written program narrative form. If you could go back to the webpage, please. And then we'll take a look at forms A through C. So let's see. There we go. Okay, thank you, Mai. So this first page gives you lets you know that a written program narrative has to be provided for all the questions in sections A through E as outlined below. So we have section A is our preschool program quality, questions A1 through A8. B is inclusion, questions B1 through B3. Section C is dual language learners, questions C1 through C2. D, program accountability, questions D1 and D2. And E, program operations E1 through E4. And the remaining part of page 1 here are the instructions that we provided to you earlier in the webinar. Okay, so if we can go ahead and scroll down to question A1. And so we'll talk a little bit here. This is preschool program quality, all of section A1, or section A. So all of the questions in this section align with our CSPP program review instrument and the program quality requirements that are included in this, the CSPP program requirements document, which we will provide to you here in a little bit. So question A1 is all about the desired results developmental profile, and all of the items underneath it, we want you to describe in detail how your agency implements already, if you have a contract with us, or will implement the use of the DRDP to meet all of these bullet points. And these are all included in our program requirements, our contract terms and conditions, etc. I would like to take one look at the scoring criteria under A1. And so we're not going to go through the scoring criteria for every single item, but I just wanted to give you a quick overview of what this looks like. So the way it's scored is if the response is non-responsive, right? You don't address this question. And this is for all of our items. You would receive a score of 0. Inadequate would be a score of 2. Adequate would be a score of 4, and comprehensive would be a score of 6. So when you look in these boxes underneath each item, it's important that you pay really close attention. And we have bolded the areas where, like, we want to draw your eye to it. So you see that when we're scoring you a 2, you have provided, in this instance, 1 or 2 of the required components of the DRDP. If you have included 3 or 4 of the required components of the DRDP, we would score you a 4. And if you have included 5 or more of the required components of the DRDP, we're going to score you a 6. Keep in mind that the scoring criteria that you see here is aligned with the scoring rubric that our readers and scorers use when they review your application. Okay? Okay, so let's go to A2. Same form. Nope, same form, I'm sorry. We're gonna just walk through the questions real quick. So A2, yeah, down a little bit more. Okay, A2, we're asking about your education program. And notice in every one of our questions that we're saying, describe in detail how the agency already implements or will implement. And in this case, it's an education program for all of the children enrolled in the program that meets all of the following bulleted requirements. A3, next question. Here we're looking at your staff development program. Note that we included on here that bullet 4 here, the identification of how your agency will support staff acquisition of units towards credentials and or degrees to advance on their career ladder trajectory lattice through professional development that is offered. Noting that staff development topics should include but not be limited to the following: the CSPP program requirements and contract terms and conditions, the preschool learning foundations, the DRDP and the desired results system, effective adult-child interactions, children's developing literacy and language development aligned with the preschool learning foundations and frameworks, children's developing math and science aligned with the preschool learning foundations and frameworks, and the children's social emotional development, again, aligned with the preschool learning foundations and frameworks. Okay, and if we can scroll down, here's some more. Curriculum selection and implementation, implicit bias, restorative justice practices, and cultural and linguistically responsive practice, adverse child experiences, ACEs, and trauma healing informed practice, creating developmentally informed environments, administration and use of child assessments to inform instruction, support for multilingual learners, including home language development and strategies for a bilingual classroom, and serving children with disabilities in inclusive settings, including universal design for learning and engaging culturally and linguistically diverse families. Okay, next question. And down a little more. Then we're looking at A4, your family engagement in education. So we want you to explain in detail the delivery of a family engagement and education program to support and expand awareness of early education and care of children that includes all of the following bulleted required components. And so in light of the amount of time we have left, I'm not going to read every one of these out to you. So we're just going to touch base on each question in the written program narrative. Okay, scroll down, please, Mai. A5 is related to health and social services. A6 is community involvement. A7 is nutrition. A8 is your annual program self-evaluation. Those are all of the questions for A1. I do really want to emphasize here a little bit on inclusion. We have not included these in previous RFAs, but we felt that it was really important to address this and ask applicants how they are going to support children with exceptional needs. So for B1 related to inclusion, we're asking about the accommodations, adaptations, and modifications. And so our CSPP programs serving children with disabilities need to provide access to instruction, collaborate with local education agencies who have designed the supports and services necessary for the child through the IEP or IFSP, and promote the child's sense of belonging in the classroom with their same age peers, and hold students to high expectations. We want you to describe in detail the accommodations, adaptations, and modifications that your agency currently uses or will implement to ensure children will be able to participate in high quality and supportive inclusion programs for children with an IEP, an IFSP, and children with disabilities within the program. Okay, B2, please. And now we're asking in B2 related to inclusion regarding access. So here again, we want you to describe in detail your policies and processes to ensure children with disabilities who have an IEP or IFSP have access to fully participate in instruction, utilizing materials that are accessible and activities in the CSPP classroom. B3, here we're asking you about the resources that you will use to ensure that coordination of special education supports and services can be delivered in the classroom to maintain participation in the least restrictive learning environment for children with IEPs, IFSPs, and children with disabilities. Okay, now we can move to section C. Section C is all about multilingual language learners, and we're asking here with C1 about your family home language identification. We want to know here how you identify the home languages of children and families within the program and within your community. C2. C2, we want you to describe here your methods, supports, and resources to support multilingual learners' acquisition and development of the English language within the classroom while strengthening the development of their home language. If the CSPP is a dual language immersion or bilingual language program, we also want you to include how children who speak English will be supported in their acquisition and development of the second language used in the program. Okay, I think we can go to section D. Section D is about program accountability. Here we're asking you about enrollment and how you will ensure families enrolled in the program meet the eligibility requirements of the CSPP contracts. Next one. And D2, we are asking you about attendance recording and reporting and how you will ensure your compliance with the attendance recording and reporting requirements of the CSPP contract. And these are included in the funding terms and conditions, which we will share here with you shortly. Okay. E1, we're asking you here about the hours of operation for 4-year-old children. So we know that you may apply for part day CSPP, but we also know that we have, CSPP as an extended learning option for children, right? So here we're asking you about what your daily hours of operation are and how the hours are going to meet the need for full day services, which would be considered 9 or more hours per day for eligible families of 4-year-old children. And if you're proposing to operate for less than 9 hours a day, describe any model of service delivery that you might use to offer extended hours of service through other LEA programs such as TK, kindergarten, Head Start, expanded learning programs, etc. E2, we're asking about the minimum days of operation for 4-year-old children. So here we're doing the same thing that we did in E1. We're asking if you're proposing to operate a part day CSPP at 3 hours a day, or you're proposing for your full day that it's going to be 6 hours a day. We'd like to know here who you might partner with to provide 9 hours a day of service. Oh, this is minimum days. I am so sorry. The minimum days. So this is annually a full year program is 246 days. That's what it's defined as. So here we're asking if you're proposing for a part day CSPP at 100 to 75 to 180 days, or less than 246 days for a full day, full year program, how you're going to meet the needs of families who have a need for full year services, and which other entities you might partner with to offer extended learning opportunities. Okay, thank you. And here again, we're doing the same, except we're asking about hours of operation for 3-year-old children, with a full day being considered 9 or more hours a day, who you might partner with, what your model of service delivery with the LEA will use to offer extended hours of service through other early education programs, such as the LEA funded preschool program, possibly community-based organizations, Head Start, etc. All right, E4, again, here we have the minimum days of operation for our 3-year-old children, and we're asking you the same thing here. If it's going to be less than 246 days per year, what will the model of service delivery look like, with additional days of service offered through other early education programs, again, such as the LEA funded preschool program, community-based organizations, Head Start, etc. Okay. And I believe that's the end of the written program narrative. Keeping in mind that we want you to be as detailed as possible, but you are limited to the space within the boxes included on this template. Just do the best you can, and keep in mind the scoring criteria that you want to pay attention to those bolded sections in each box to get your highest possible points. Okay, so I don't think we actually have time to go through the forms, the written program narrative forms, which is A through C. However, what those are you're going to initial multiple items on each of those forms, acknowledging that you are aware that we will monitor you, that you have to meet program quality requirements, and that you have to adhere to the statutes and regulations. Okay, so we can go back to the PowerPoint on slide 43. Next slide, please. Great, thank you. So there are some resources on our webpage that are available to you for completing your written program narrative. So we have our California State Preschool Program requirements. We have our funding terms and conditions. We have our preschool learning foundations, and the desired results developmental profile information. Maya is going to drop the links to each of those documents in the chat for you now. And I'll give her a moment to do that before she moves us over to slide 44. Thank you, Maya. Okay, now let's talk about considerations for California state preschool programs as an extended early learning and care option for children enrolled in transitional kindergarten or kindergarten. Children enrolled in a TK or kindergarten program may be enrolled in the CSPP for extended learning and care services during the hours that they are not receiving educational services in a TK or kindergarten program. Contractors are required to follow all current laws for certification of eligibility and need and prioritization for services when enrolling children in the CSPP for extended learning and care services. In accordance with Ed Code Section 48000I, the State Superintendent of Public Instruction, the SSPI, has authorized CSPP contracting agencies to offer extended early learning and care services for children enrolled in a TK or kindergarten program if their families meet the eligibility requirements set forth in Education Code Section 8208. All right, we will now discuss the parameters for serving children in the CSPP when they are also enrolled in either a TK or kindergarten program. Next slide. Thank you, Mai. CSPP contractors may enroll children or retain children already enrolled in CSPP for extended learning and care services if the child is currently enrolled in TK or kindergarten and the family meets the applicable eligibility and need requirements of the CSPP, again, as stated in Education Code Section 8208. Next slide. If a child is enrolled in a TK or kindergarten program and the CSPP, contractors cannot be reimbursed for providing CSPP services during the same time in which a child is receiving educational services from their TK or kindergarten program. Part A CSPPs are required to certify families and provide CSPP services for a minimum of 3 hours per day. So if the hours of a child's enrollment in the TK or kindergarten program overlap with any of the service hours offered in the Part Day CSPP, the child cannot be certified for Part Day CSPP if they are enrolled in the TK or kindergarten. Next slide. Thank you. Note that the CSPP is not a replacement for kindergarten. For kindergarten age children to be eligible for CSPP extended early learning and care services, they must also be enrolled in a kindergarten program. Contractors are required to follow the current priority order for enrolling children into the CSPP. So this means that all otherwise eligible 3- and 4-year-old children must be prioritized for enrollment into the state preschool program before children enrolled in either the TK or kindergarten can be enrolled. Children enrolled in a TK or kindergarten program that are enrolled in the CSPP extended early learning and care services must meet the eligibility and need requirements for CSPP as applicable. Children also cannot be enrolled in 2 separate sessions of Part Day CSPP. This means that children enrolled in a TK or kindergarten program are limited to only 1 Part Day CSPP session, either before or after school. Next slide. All right, so this is in regards to our full day CSPP as an extended learning and care option. Our full day CSPP contractors can certify children enrolled in a TK or kindergarten program for CSPP during the hours that they are not receiving TK or kindergarten services based on the family's certified need for services. So again, they have to meet the eligibility requirements and the need for requirements. Full day CSPP contractors must certify a family with a child enrolled in a TK or kindergarten program with a school schedule and a vacation schedule, and assess a family fee for each of those schedules as applicable. For example, if the CSPP is open from 7 a.m. to 7 p.m., and the family has a need for services from 7 a.m. to 5 p.m., but the child has TK from 9 a.m. to 1 p.m., then the child can be certified for full day CSPP from 7 a.m. to 9 a.m. and from 1 p.m. to 5 p.m. This would be their school schedule. And then they can be certified for a vacation schedule from 7 a.m. to 5 p.m. when the TK is not in session. Okay, so I'm going to hand it back over to Jackie to share some resources with you, direct you to where you can ask questions, and to close us out. Thank you all so much. It's been a pleasure being here with you today.
Thanks, Crystal. Now, if your school district or county office of education does not currently have sufficient facilities to house a CSPP, your school district or county office of education can apply for funding to construct or modify existing facilities through the California Preschool, Transitional Kindergarten, and Full-Day Kindergarten Facilities Grant Program. School districts can also apply for the facility funding on behalf of charter schools who operate on district property. Applicants may apply for grant funds in advance of having a CSPP contract in place, indicating in the application for grant funding as a future contractor. For more information on the California Preschool, Transitional Kindergarten, and Full-Day Kindergarten Facilities Grant Program, visit the Department of General Services, DGS, Office of Public School Construction, OPSC Services webpage at https://www.dgs.ca.gov/OPSC/services. The Early Education Division Program Quality Implementation Office Consultant Directory webpage is located at https://www.cde.ca.gov/sp/ci/assignments.asp. The Early Education Nutrition Fiscal Services Fiscal Apportionment and Analyst Directory webpage is located at https://www.cde.ca.gov/fg/AA/FAAD.asp. Next slide, please. If you have any questions regarding eligibility to apply for the CSPP expansion funding or the RFA application process, please email us at cspprfa@cde.ca.gov. Next slide, please. Thank you all for joining us today. We are looking forward to receiving your applications and to expanding the CSPP across the state in order to serve your children and families in high-quality early education programs. We know that the services provided through the CSPP truly make a difference in lifelong outcomes for children and families, and we couldn't do that work without all of you. Thank you all.
We will leave the Zoom open for a few more minutes to allow for additional questions to be responded to in the Q&A. And so if you have additional questions, go ahead and put those in there now, and we will continue answering until the end of this webinar time. Again, thank you all so much for joining us today.